Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about all the yarn shops that I visited on my Easter trip, as well as how far I got with my travel project. Today is a bit of a special video. I am just back from my trip to Amsterdam, The Hague and Paris. I got to see so many lovely yarn shops and I even picked up a couple of things. I travelled the entire way and between cities solely by train, so I knew I had a lot of knitting time ahead of me. So this video is going to be split into two sections. The first half I'm going to take you through the yarn shops that I visited. I managed to get a little bit of B-roll for each of the shops so you can have a little peek in with me. I'm also going to take you through what I picked up in each of the shops and what patterns I have lined up for each of the yarns that I bought. For the second part, I will show you my travel project and how far I was able to knit on it while I was traveling. I'm also going to give you a little bit of a review of my travel setup because I think I really nailed the pack for this holiday and I'm really pleased with my setup. So first up, I will talk about some yarn shops. I started in Amsterdam and I was so lucky that my hotel ended up being on the same street as two yarn shops. Totally unintentional, but very happy about it. The first shop that I visited was called Hooks and Yarn. They had a really nice mix of commercial yarns and unique blends. I had my eye on their Seahauer blend, which is a mix of 50% yak and 50% silk that's made for their shop. Sadly, I didn't pick anything up from this shop, but I really did enjoy visiting. The second shop that was on this street was Stephen and Penelope. I have heard so much about this shop and I was desperate to go see it for myself. And as soon as I entered, I was met with this burst of joyous colour. It can be a tad overwhelming, but the staff are lovely and there's a sofa and a table and chairs to sit and look at patterns or just to take a break while you're being assaulted with these glorious shots of colour. They stock a huge amount of hand-dyed yarns from a few European countries, as well as their house brands, which are mostly named after bicycles, which I found super cute. I was quite taken with their tandem range, which is a DK weight merino yarn in a bright blue colour, but I wussed out at the last minute. I did pick up a couple of things, however. First up, I picked up this Holskan Coast, which is a 55% lamb's wool and a 45% cotton blend. I had hoped that I could use this for a coastline mini dress, but I knitted up a quick gauge swatch in the hotel and I didn't quite meet gauge, so I decided to pass on this, but I am going to use these two colours with a third yarn that I have to make a crochet jumper. I'm thinking about making the Wavy Sweater by Bailey Geiger. I've made this pattern before as a top, and I think combining these two yarns with the green will make a fun, springy, summery layering piece. Next up, I got this Walk Tough Sock Mini in the colour Hunter. Walk is a German hand dyeing business, and I was really drawn to this particular colour because I have been looking for a yarn to pair with a couple of other scraps that I have to make the Stomping Dinosaur Socks by Crochet by Borgosia. So this green is going to do the cuffs and the heels and the toes. I'm really excited to get started on these, and they may be my next project that I start to make. I may even wind this once I finish filming this video. Next up from Stephen and Penelope, I bought this beautiful combo of hedgehog yarn and dark omen yarn. Hedgehog Fibres is an Irish brand, but they dyed this colourway especially for the Stephen and Penelope shop. And after I talked myself out of getting that jumper quantity of tandem, I really wanted to find something with this beautiful bright blue, and I was really taken by this colour. This is the colour Harbour. I also picked up this sock mini in Disco Dream by Dark Omen Yarns. I think it really picks up the pinky purpley shade in the Hedgehog Fibres yarn. I think it'll make those colours pop, particularly in the main colour. Together, I'm going to use these to make a pair of Jomo socks by Rachel Fletcher. So that was it for my yarn shops in Amsterdam. I didn't anticipate going to a yarn shop in The Hague, but I was very lucky to find some time to visit Cross and Woods. The yarn store is stunning, really lovely, and carries a mix of fibres, including some more rustic wools, some hand dyed yarns, as well as some interesting plant fibre blends. I had a really wonderful chat with the Cross of Cross and Woods, and they pointed me in the direction of some hand dyed yarn that was dyed in the Netherlands. So I had to pick up this beautiful skein from the Wee Yarn Company in the colour Blossom. This is their Yaldi Yak sock base, and it contains 20% yak, 10% nylon, and 70% superwash merino. So, quite an interesting sock blend that I haven't used before. I was really drawn to this colour, the muted dusty pinks alongside the shots of bright pink and bright orange makes me very happy. And I feel like matches my two aesthetics of bright and pastel. And this skein of yarn is destined to become a pair of Sous-Bois socks by Audrey Borrego. I think this colour palette will really work with the cables and make a very snazzy pair of socks. I had hoped to go see a couple of yarn stores in Paris, but by the time we arrived, it was Easter weekend and a lot of things were closed. But luckily, my first choice was still open, and I got to visit the Lil Weasel, which is located in this beautiful arcade and stretches over 3 units within the shopping arcade. They have 2 yarn shops and 1 fabric shop all in the same area. One of the yarn shops is dedicated more to silks and plant fibres and some embroidery. The other unit is dedicated to more wool yarns, hand dyed, as well as some cashmere and mohair. I was so drawn to the Durarium Gilead range, and although I didn't buy anything, I took the opportunity to do a bit of colour playing and came away with some colour palettes that I am pretty sure I'm going to use for the Bridget sweater. I did, however, purchase this Williette Parisienne, which is in the colour Sorbet au Café Fleur. This yarn is hand dyed in France, especially for the shop, and my partner picked it out and requested that I knit him a pair of socks, and he kindly gifted me this skein. So how could I refuse? He actually hasn't had a pair of socks from me yet, so I was really happy that he requested a pair. And I'm going to turn the skein into a pair of Silent Water socks by Gabrielle Barch. I think a textured sock will work really well with both the light colours in the skein as well as the pops of neon pink and yellow. And the last thing that I bought on my trip was a real special one. I didn't set out to buy a Parisian yarn in Paris, but when I saw that Lil Weasel had a section for Bien-Aimé and they stocked their sock yarn, I couldn't resist, especially because I think this colour would work really perfectly for the Chilton socks by Emma Jaeger, and I've been keeping an eye out for a skein of yarn that would work with that pattern for a while now. I've been wanting to try La Bien-Aimée for a fair bit now, but it does cost quite a lot, especially in the UK, so to be able to pick this up in Paris as a souvenir skein was a lot more palatable. So that was my little yarn haul. I will acknowledge that I only really bought sock yarn. I found it really hard to justify buying garment quantities of yarn, both because of cost, but also because I was travelling in a rucksack. This is something that I'm going to look at in the future because I would like to try different types of yarns. And both jumper quantities that I did have my eye on, I know I could probably get while I was back home as well. On the contrary, I found it really easy to justify buying sock yarns because of my 12 pairs of socks goal this year. Although I now currently have enough yarn to make 8 pairs of socks, including 2 scrappy pairs. So I think that's it for me in sock yarn until the end of the year. Now I will move on to my travel project knitting. Because this was such a train-heavy trip, I didn't just want to knit socks the whole time. I wanted to make something a bit more substantial, but not too bulky. And as the Plot Twist Tank by Jaime Creates was on both my spring and summer knitting plans and works towards my Make More Tanks square of my Make 9, I thought this would be the perfect project. So I wound my yarn, I packed up my new project bag, and I cast it on the first train to Amsterdam. Firstly, I want to praise this little project bag that I picked up from TK Maxx. I found it in the toiletries section, and it is shaped like the super expensive redesigned leather project bags. with a diagonal zip that fully opens. Except this one only cost me a tenner. It fit both cakes, a growing project, and everything I needed for the entire trip. Also, because it's so compact, it was easy to take in and out of my travel rucksack. Everything was kept neat and in one place. I decided to alternate skeins for the entire project. I wanted to avoid a harsh line where I would inevitably need to swap cakes when one ran out, and I really love the colour dispersion in the top. There's not really any difference between what I was knitting flat and knitting in the round. I particularly love this colour from Creative Anarchy. This is their Dancing Queen in their Bourgeoisie base, which is an 80% merino and a 20% silk base. And I'm really excited to see how this fibre content holds up in the spring. The first section of the pattern is quite slow going. Between all of the straps and the neck shaping and armhole shaping, it just takes a while to get into the flow. That is no fault of the pattern. I think that's just standard tank top knitting. The pattern is very well written and very clear, which is exactly what you want for a project on the go. By the time we'd arrived in Amsterdam, I hadn't even finished the back panel, and that was our longest train. At this point, I was slightly worried that I had bitten off more than I could chew. A few days later, and a quick train to The Hague, and I had managed to just about join in the round. This was the midway point of our trip, and we were halfway done with our train journeys. At this point, I could really appreciate the cables that form around the armholes. It's such a clever way to add edging without having to go back and pick up stitches for them. Around this time, however, the knitting really kicked off. Unfortunately, both myself and my partner started to feel quite unwell while we were out there, so we decided to take some of the days a lot easier, including the travel days. On our journey down to Paris, I spent 3 hours in Rotterdam station, a lot of the time in a lovely lounge, which I can highly recommend. It's on platform 2 and it has a very reasonable entrance fee. I spent all that time knitting away and making the most of the recovery time. By the time I got to Paris, the body was well underway and I was quite shocked with the progress I'd made. Paris brought a few more days of rest with as much sightseeing as we could both muster. I did spend quite a lot of time in the lounge of the hotel, which was really bright and comfortable. On our last night, I was able to transfer the top onto some scrap yarn and tried it on for the first time. I decided to do one more cable repeat before finishing off the ribbing. I hadn't anticipated getting this far when I packed to start my journey, and I hadn't read ahead to figure out what size needles I needed for the ribbing. Luckily, it was the same as the body, so I was able to finish the body of this top, minus the cast off, on our last train back to London. Once I arrived home, I was able to cast off, pick up for the neckband, and finish off the neck of this tank top. So the only thing I wasn't able to complete on my actual trip was the neckband of the tank top, but as I knitted it on the same day as my travel day, I'm calling it a win. So, here it is! I have not had a chance to block it yet. In fact, as soon as I finish filming this video, I am going to block it so that I can insert some final footage for you at the end of this video. Realistically, if I hadn't have gotten so ill and I'd done more sightseeing, I probably wouldn't have been able to finish this tank top. But I still think it makes for a really nice travel project. At no point did this outgrow its project bag. I was quite careful zipping and unzipping, but it didn't get caught and it didn't get tangled. I needed very minimal accessories and notions to complete this project, and everything fit really neatly and compactly into my project bag. Overall, I think this is a success. It looks great, the yarn is beautiful, the pattern was fun, the project was portable and entertaining, and now with the power of movie magic, I will show you what it looks like washed and blocked and on my body. that's the end of the video. If you have any suggestions for travel projects, please leave them in the comments. I'm always open to find more travel friendly patterns. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully. Bye.